Hello and welcome. This is episode number 4 of the Cody Porter Sports Show. It's November 9th, 2023. A bit delayed getting this episode up as technical difficulties last evening. No power prevented me from researching or getting anything done. So that was that, but still going to get it up today. It's been raining all day, so if you hear rain on the window, that's what it is. It's rain. But let's get right into things. College football so far this year, straight up picks 43-26, still pretty good. Spread record's getting better now, 27-42. I'm going to cheat a little bit this week. You'll figure that out here in a second. But I usually do 6 games every single week. Week 0, I did 7 games because there were only 7 games, so I just picked them all. But there's not a bunch of great games this week. A lot of the games involving the better teams. The spreads are very large, so I'm picking spread and straight up 4 games, diving into them, and then I got 6 more I'm going to pick. They're all massive point spreads with at least one good team. They're all these two score point spreads. I think the favored team will win in all of those, but spread-wise, I think it's a little different, and that if I do well with those, that'll get me closer. My goal into the season is to try to get that against the spread record as close to even as I can get. 27-42, it's possible. We'll see what happens. But let's go ahead and dive into game number 1. Michigan at Penn State. Michigan, the number 2 ranked team in the CFP polls. Penn State, number 9. Michigan, 4.5-point favorites. And I think the biggest thing going to this one, to pick this game, is just to look at that Penn State-Ohio State game. The score was close. It was 20-12. It was an 8-point game. It was 20-6, 27 for most of the game, and then Penn State had a late score, whatever. It was close in points, but really on the field, it was clear Ohio State was the better team and was going to win that game pretty easily. In that game, Drew Aller was 18 of 42, 191 yards, and their rushing attack only averaged 1.9 yards per carry on 26 attempts. Ohio State's defense just controlled them in every facet. And I think Michigan can look to do the same. On offense, Michigan has scored at least 40 in 5 straight games. Their average margin of victory this year is 34 points. J.J. McCarthy has 2,200 total yards, 21 touchdowns. Blake Corum, he's not having as good a year as he was last year. He still has 16 touchdowns, had 18 last year. Michigan, first in yards allowed per game on defense. Penn State, second. So 2 very good defenses. And then that's yards allowed per game, and then points per game allowed. Michigan is allowing less than 7 points per game. That's absurd. It's like 6.7 or something is what they're giving up per game. Ohio State is second in yards or in points allowed per game at 10.5, and Penn State's right around 12. So these are some elite defenses, and the Big 12 just got some elite defenses anyway. And you could say, well, that's because the bottom half of the Big 10 is atrocious, and these teams just dominate them. But that's for you to decide if you believe that or not. I think that's true. But, I mean, Michigan's defense is for real. Penn State's defense is good, but they just couldn't do anything against Ohio State, and so that gives me no reason to think that they'll play any better against Michigan, even though it is a home game for Penn State. If this was like, 7 p.m. Eastern kickoff, whiteout, things might be different just because that environment is so crazy, but it's a home game for Penn State, kicking off at noon Eastern. It's just not the same environment. I think Michigan wins this game. They should cover 4.5 fairly easily. Oh, no. The background fell. I'm exposed. Anyway, as I was saying, Michigan minus 4.5, I think, is a pretty easy and safe pick. I also kind of like the under. It's at 45.5. The Penn State-Ohio State game was 20-12, 32 total points. Michigan's offense has been explosive, has been dynamic. They score a lot of points. I don't think they'll be quite as explosive against this good Penn State defense. But I think this game could be a 24-7, 24-10, 28-7 game. So I think 45.5 is a good under bet. Moving on, a big SEC clash. Tennessee at Missouri. Missouri was having a great year. They run to Georgia. They played a good game, but ended up losing by 8 or by 9. They lost 21-30 to Georgia. They were 15.5-point dogs and covered pretty easily. They were in that game the entire time, and Georgia kind of just had too much for them. The biggest tell in that game, the biggest reason of that outcome was 2 costly turnovers by Brady Cook. He had 2 interceptions. He was only 14 of 30 passing the ball. Cody Schrader was good on the ground, but Brady Cook just couldn't get it done against Georgia. And so, Missouri's having a great year. You kind of think they'd be favored in this one. They're not. They're 1.5-point dogs at home. They're both 7-2. Tennessee is a lot better at forcing turnovers than Missouri is. Tennessee has 13 forced to Missouri's 8. And, like it proved last week, is a game of inches, a game of, a handful of plays, and those 2 turnovers were super costly for Missouri. I think Tennessee is going to win that turnover battle again, and I think that's why they are favored in this one. Tennessee on offense is extremely balanced, and they score a lot. Team rush, 2,000 yards. Joe Milton passing, 2,000 yards. So that's 4,000 yards split right down the middle. 17 rushing touchdowns, 16 passing touchdowns. This Tennessee team is top to bottom fairly good. They're just in a SEC that LSU, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, top of the crop. Everyone, they're going to get all the glory. And then Tennessee kind of falls in right under them. Even though Tennessee, LSU, you could say that just because Tennessee has a defense, they're better than LSU. But, who cares? I like Tennessee minus 1.5 in this one. Missouri's had a great year, a lot better than anyone's expected, but I think water may start to find its level here for the Tigers, as I think they'll lose to Tennessee this game and they'll drop to 7-3. Tennessee plays Florida next week, or Missouri plays Florida next week. I think Florida could win that game. And I very easily I could see Missouri, at one point being 7-1 and then finishing the year 7-5 or 8-4, which would be better than expected. But they had such high hopes, going into that Georgia game, to where it's kind of like it's a good season, but what could have been, It's like Tennessee minus 1.5 in that one. Then you got Utah at Washington. Washington home favorites, 9.5-point favorites. The biggest concern for Utah is that they've had a great year despite not having Cam Rising, and the biggest concern is that they don't have a real passer. Bryson Barnes has not looked very good. Bryson Barnes, he's had spots of goodness, but against Oregon, Barnes was 15 of 29, 136 yards, 2 picks, and Utah got boat raced. It was 35-6. So in that biggest game of the year, Utah just had no chance. They kind of trolled USC, beat them by 2 with their great coaching, great subbing. They had College Game Day come to town for that Utah-Oregon game, and then it wasn't close. That wasn't a good game. The game is at Washington. Washington's a great environment. They're one of the best teams in the country. They're ranked 5th. And it'll be cold and rainy. And last week against USC, Washington proved they don't need Michael Penix to throw the ball 50 times and have 400 yards to win the game, because Dylan Johnson had 256 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns, averaging 10 yards per carry. He had as many rushing yards as Penix had passing yards. So Washington can win either way. If they need to run the ball, they can run it and dominate you. If they need to pass the ball, they can pass the ball and dominate you. And Utah's strong suit is their defense, but they just don't have any offense to keep up and keep their defense rested and keep up with a team like Washington, I don't think. I think that was proven in the Oregon game. Oregon, Washington, cream of the crop, easy 1-2. Then there's kind of everybody else. And not to say that these teams aren't as good, but they aren't as good, and it doesn't seem like they can compete with those 2 teams, Oregon and Washington. I like Washington minus 9.5, even though Utah's defense is very good. Utah's the 8th scoring defense, but only the 87th scoring offense, whereas Washington has the 4th scoring offense and the 45th scoring defense. So not an incredible defense, but above average. And Utah's offense just is middle of the pack, not very good. And I think that Washington will be able to just make Bryson Barnes beat him, and I don't think he can. I don't think he can by 9.5 points. So I like Washington minus 9.5 in that one. And the final game I'm getting deep into on this one, is going to be Ole Miss and Georgia. And Georgia was pushed to the brink, probably their toughest game they've had all year since the South Carolina game when they were down at half. They win against Missouri by 9 at home. They're at home again this week against Mississippi, like I said last week. It kind of seems like their toughest tests are at home, which helps them. They're 2-time defending national champions. It's kind of how the schedule ended up this year. But, of course, they go to Tennessee next week. I think that'll be a huge matchup, especially if Tennessee beats Missouri. But this week, Georgia, Mississippi, Missouri showed how you can beat Georgia. They limited Georgia to 4 yards per carry on the ground, and they made Carson Beck, lead the team and beat them. And they did. And the biggest thing was the 2 defensive turnovers. You take those 2 defensive turnovers off the board, and you don't know how that game goes. Georgia, Missouri. Missouri might win it, might be a little closer than the 9 points, but those 2 turnovers were the big deal. Ole Miss defense just isn't great. It's a little above average, 44th scoring defense. Both these offenses are great. Ole Miss averaged 38.8 points per game. Georgia, 39.3 points per game. On defense, the most points Georgia's allowed all year, 21 twice and 20 twice. Ole Miss gave up 49 to LSU and 35 to Texas A&M. Ole Miss's defense is just not very good. This is a huge game for Lane Kiffin. This win would be Lane Kiffin's biggest win so far of his coaching career. This puts him, Ole Miss, they're on the map. They're content. I don't even know if they're necessarily contending for a spot in the CFP this year just because of where they're at and the schedule's already ahead of them. But this puts them on the map for next year, coming into it as one of the top SEC teams. So it'll be a big one for Lane Kiffin. I think Ole Miss will be fired up. I think if this game is at Ole Miss, it's a bit of a different story. I think they have a better chance of winning. I like Georgia to win, but 10.5 points, just because Ole Miss's offense is good enough, I think they'll keep it within 10.5. I like Ole Miss plus 10.5, but I like Georgia to win this one. And then getting into the rapid fire picks, the ones I'm not going to dive as deep in. All these games are at least 2-score spreads where I think the favorite team should win, but the spreads are so big, you don't really know how it's going to go, to where a team could cover and stay in it to the last second, and who knows what happens in the last 2 minutes of any given football game. And I'm using this to kind of try and boost my against the spread record. But let's get into it. Alabama at Kentucky. I think if this game is at Alabama, the spread's bigger. So I think Kentucky's a good team, but Alabama is the clearly better team head to toe. I think Alabama is 10.5 point favorites, covers, even though it's in Lexington at Kroger Field, which I think is a difficult place to play. But making a 7:30 game a little more difficult, but it's a noon kick. I like Alabama minus 10.5. Then you got Arizona going to Colorado. Both teams overachieving. Colorado not doing as well since that great 3-0 start. They're 1-5 since. But they've played some of these tough Pac-12 teams very close. Pac-12 better than ever this year. And Dion has kept some of these games close. I feel like I almost threw up there. It was gross. Arizona's having a great year, though. I think they win. I wouldn't be surprised if Colorado makes this a game that upsets Arizona. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I like Colorado, though, at 10.5 point underdogs. I like them plus 10.5. Then you got Miami and Florida State. Florida State, obviously a bigger rivalry, but Florida State and Miami, they hate each other. And Florida State, just since they've been better than Miami for a little bit, and even when they've both been bad, Florida State beat them. Florida State fans just pick on Miami fans. And as a Florida fan, it's kind of funny, even though I dislike Florida State much more than I dislike Miami. This one's at Florida State. I think Norvell. I think Florida State's going to run with the score on them. I think minus 13.5 FSU is a lock. I think Miami's a good team, but I think Florida State is going to pound them on Saturday, if you know what I'm saying. Then you got West Virginia at Oklahoma. West Virginia is 13.5 point underdogs. They've played well this season. Another team overachieving, way over expectations. And Oklahoma, back-to-back losses after being 7-0 and beating Texas. Just kind of heartbreaking, turn events here at the back half of the season. West Virginia has averaged 37.7 points per game in their last 4 outings. I like West Virginia at plus 13.5. I think Oklahoma wins, especially because it's a home game. But West Virginia plus 13.5. Their offense has been so very good. I think this will be a high-scoring game, and I think it'll probably be a 7 to 10 point game. Then you got Florida at LSU. LSU proved again last week against Alabama. They have a great offense, and they have no defense. And Florida's offense has played very well, especially here the backstretch of the season. You take out that Georgia game because it's Georgia. They're number 2 in the country for a reason. They took care of Florida. But against South Carolina, against Arkansas, even though they only split those games 1-1, and they should have beat Arkansas, but their offense played very well in both those games, high scoring at least, if you didn't think, they executed perfectly and they had a chance to beat Arkansas, they still scored a lot of points, which is the name of the game, especially when you're playing LSU. You just got to be in it. Your offense just has to score because your defense probably won't be able to do much, and Florida's defense has not looked great here. As good as their offense has looked, their defense has looked that much worse. So I think it'll be high scoring. Whatever the over is, I think you take it. I like Florida plus 13.5 on the spread. I think LSU wins it, probably by, again, about 7 to 10. But I think Florida's offense is good enough just to keep a 2-score pace with LSU. And the final game I'm picking in this one is Duke at UNC. If Riley Leonard plays, it's kind of been, I think I've picked 2 or 3 Duke games this year, and it's been since the Notre Dame game. If Riley Leonard plays, Duke can win, and they should cover. No Riley Leonard again, this time instead of an ankle injury, it's a toe injury. I don't really know if he's even going to play many more snaps the rest of the season, which is very tough because Duke was having a great year. They were undefeated playing Notre Dame. They lose in the last minutes of the game to Notre Dame. They're 6-3 now. UNC 7-2. If Duke has Riley Leonard the whole season, they're probably sitting 7-2, maybe 8-1. Who knows? Just the maybe game. You don't know. Maybe they are still 6-3. But without Riley Leonard, I think UNC, Drake May, just too much. It's 2 touchdown favorites, like UNC minus 14.5. Then moving back over to the big boys, NFL. Tonight, Thursday Night Football here in just a few hours, kicks off. Panthers versus Bears. Who cares? Good run. The Panthers are 1-7. The Bears are 2-7. The Bears have both their draft picks. This game does not matter. Both these teams suck. The Panthers are riddled with injury, and the Bears have their backup quarterback in. This game stinks. The only people that are going to watch it are Panthers fans, Bears fans, and people gambling on the game. But let's look at some of the actually important, fun games. Dang it. My anger from these jerseys hanging behind me is about to explode through me like it's November 2021. If you know, you know. Important games this week in the NFL. Browns at Ravens is kind of that AFC North. Ravens, like I said 2 weeks ago when I was looking at the NFL, cream of the crop. They're a little bit above everyone in the NFC North. The Browns are trying to keep pace. They're 5-3, Ravens 7-2. And the Ravens' offense has just been so good this year. Lamar Jackson is just playing as good a ball as he ever has. And the Browns' defense is playing just lights out. The Browns' defense on 4th down, 26%, best in the league. Ravens' 3rd down offense, one of the best in the league at 45%. I just think Deshaun Watson's just not the guy he was before. He did some things, allegedly. In 5 games this year, he has just 900 yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 picks. He's washed, and it's probably because of some bad karma. Who knows? But I think the Ravens should win this one. But, the Browns' defense is just so good. They could keep the team in it. And you got Texans and Bengals. And with the Bengals, just like the Browns, just like the Steelers, they're trying to keep up with the Ravens. But the Texans, and C.J. Stroud has been proving all year that he probably was the best quarterback in the last draft. Most passing yards by a rookie in a game last week against the Bucs, who are not a terrible pass defense. The Texans have won 4 of the last 5 against the Bengals, which you wouldn't think because the Texans have been pretty bad for a while. The Bengals started the year slow, kind of as they usually do, but now that it looks like Burrow is fully healthy, they've rattled off some wins. They beat the Bills last week. I do expect the Bengals to win this game, but I think it'll be a really good game. And the Bengals kind of needed to win this one to keep up pace with the Ravens in the AFC North. And it will really help if the Browns can pull off a victory. Then both the Browns and the Bengals would be 6-3 to the Ravens 7-3. And they, kind of pull near neck and neck with the Ravens at the top of the division. Then you get the 49ers going to the Jaguars. 49ers still without Trent Williams, and I was reading that his injury, and now it's the other side. I'm about to lose my mind. I had no problems. No problems last week with my backdrop, and this week seems to just hate me for whatever freaking reason. Whatever. Like I was saying, 49ers, Jaguars. Since losing Trent Williams, 49ers have lost 3 in a row, only scoring 17 in each of those 3 games. I was reading today that it looks like Trent Williams' injury may be worse than originally expected. They do get Deebo Samuels back. San Francisco is a 3-point favorite. They're only 4-4 against the spread. It being in Jacksonville, I think, makes a difference. I think this will be a really good game. Just with the 49ers coming off a bye and getting Samuel back, I think they'll be better than they have been. They should have a bounce-back game, be better on offense. But Trent Williams, still, pretty big loss to not have on that offense. The final info game I really want to look at, Lions at Chargers. Chargers took care of the Jets last week. And when it comes to Chargers home games, they're kind of like neutral site games. And we know Lions fans travel really well. In the Lions-Bucks game in Tampa, I think Detroit and Tampa are pretty far away from each other on the map. I could be wrong. I've never been to Detroit, but I think they are. It was packed with Lions fans. I think it'll be the same here at the Chargers. I think this will be a good game. I want to give the edge to the Lions. There's the better team, the better coach team with Dan Campbell over Brandon Staley. Especially Jahmyr Gibbs had a coming out party last week, which I've always thought is a weird phrase to put when the player's a good game for the first time, but whatever. Jahmyr Gibbs, 26 carries, 152 yards, 1 touchdown. I think Montgomery's coming back this week, and Dan Campbell said, Gibbs proved it last week. It's time for them to have a running back room by committee. Whoever has the hot hand is going to run the ball. And Montgomery was having a great year. He had a little injury. Gibbs had a great week last week. I think it's just plug and play. You throw 2 running backs in the backfield with Jared Goff. I think this Lions offense could be even deadlier when you have the threat of both of them in the backfield. So that's a little NFL talk for the week. I want to recap the games real quick. The 4 games I picked straight up against the spread. I like Michigan minus 4.5 against Penn State, and I like the under of 45.5. And you got Tennessee at Missouri. I like Tennessee as minus 1.5 point road favorites. Then Washington playing host to Utah's 9.5 point favorites. I like Washington minus 9.5. And then Mississippi going to Georgia. I like Georgia money line, but Ole Miss plus 10.5 against the spread. And then just against the spread picks on these, big favorites here. Alabama, Kentucky, I like Alabama minus 10.5. Arizona at Colorado, I like Colorado plus 10.5. Miami at Florida State minus 13.5. West Virginia at Oklahoma, I like West Virginia plus 13.5. Florida at LSU, Florida plus 13.5. And Duke at UNC minus 14.5. That's episode 4 here on November 9th, 2023. Episode 4 of the Cody Porter Sports Show. A little delayed due to technical difficulties. It looks like some more winter weather is coming after a little break in the cold. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day, rest of your night, rest of your weekend, and I'll see you again next week. See ya.